I can't believe I let you talk me into this, Jaymie Carter muttered, tugging at the hem of her off-the-shoulder lavender dress as she stepped out of the rideshare and gawked up at the glittering facade of Hotel Vivre. You needed a night out, her best friend Tessa replied, looping her arm through Jaymie's and dragging her toward the entrance. Besides, how often does your childhood friend launch a luxury hotel in Manhattan? You're not skipping this. Jaymie rolled her eyes, but she couldn't deny the building was stunning glass walls, gold detailing, valet attendants in crisp black suits. She felt wildly underdressed, even though Tessa had practically forced her into designer heels and curled her hair like she was going to the Oscars. As they stepped inside, a string quartet played from a sleek mezzanine above while champagne was passed around on silver trays. Everything sparkled: crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and people. Everyone sparkled, except for Jaymie, who felt like a very confused extra in a movie she hadn't auditioned for. Tessa leaned in. Okay, so word is the investor backing this entire launch is here tonight, Billionaire. Young, reclusive. No one's seen him yet, but apparently he's ridiculously tall, dark, and brooding. Jaymie cut in, sipping from her champagne glass with a teasing smile. Tessa laughed. Basically, but also loaded beyond belief. Some tech empire, I think. Point is, try not to spill anything on him. Jaymie rolled her eyes again and scanned the room. She wasn't here to mingle with billionaires. She was here because her old college roommate, Leela, had poured her life savings into this hotel dream, and Jaymie had promised to be there when it finally became real. Jay, Leela's voice rang out from across the room. Jaymie turned just in time to be crushed in a hug by her petite, hyper-enthusiastic friend. You did it, Jaymie said, pulling back to look at her. Seriously, this place is insane. I'm still waiting to wake up, Leela beamed. Come meet some people, and the investor is here. Just got here, actually. You'll die when you see him, Jaymie laughed. Why does everyone keep saying that? But Leela was already dragging her toward the back of the ballroom, where a sleek private lounge was roped off. A man stood just inside the entrance, speaking to a hostess. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, no tie, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. His posture was relaxed, but there was something sharp about him. Like he saw everything, he turned around. Jaymie froze. Oh no, he was beautiful, not pretty, not soft, but striking. His hair was dark and swept back, jawline angled like it had been carved into him by precision. His eyes were cool gray, focused and unreadable, and they locked onto hers like he'd been expecting her. This is Xander Thorne, Leela said brightly, oblivious to the storm that just erupted in Jaymie's chest. He's the investor. Of course he is. Xander extended a hand. Jaymie, was it? His voice was low and calm, but something about it made her throat tighten. She shook his hand, stunned by the warmth of it. Yeah, Jaymie Carter, congrats on the hotel. It's ridiculous. He actually smiled. A real one. That's the goal. Leela got pulled away by someone from the press, leaving Jaymie standing awkwardly next to Xander. She cleared her throat. So, you're the guy behind all this, in a way, he said, watching her. Leela had the vision. I just gave it legs. Jaymie tilted her head. And a few $1 million, his eyes flickered with something unreadable. Something like that? She wasn't sure what made her say it, but it came out before she could stop herself. You're not what I expected. Good, he said. Expectations are boring. And then, just like that, he turned and walked past the rope back into the lounge. Jaymie blinked. What just happened? Tessa appeared beside her a second later. Did he talk to you? Holy hell, Jay, I think he was flirting. No, he wasn't, Jaymie said quickly. He was just being polite. But even as she said it, she could still feel his eyes on her. Like he'd looked at her and seen something more than just Leela's +1. An hour later, Jaymie stood on the rooftop terrace away from the noise. The city glittered below, and for once she felt like she could breathe. You don't like parties. She spun around. Xander stood behind her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He offered her one. She hesitated. Are you always this observant? I'm good at reading people, he said easily. She took the glass. And what do you read from me? He looked at her for a long second. You're not impressed by all this. The money, the show, you're here because you care about Leela, not because you want to be seen. Jaymie blinked. That's creepily accurate, he shrugged. It's rare. She sipped the champagne. You're different too, he raised a brow. In a good way, I think so, she said, then laughed. I mean, you're not standing around bragging about your net worth, so that's a start. I stopped caring what people think a long time ago, he said, then added, except right now. She glanced at him. Why? Because I don't know what you're thinking. Jaymie's heart thudded. She looked away. I'm thinking I wasn't expecting to meet someone like you tonight. He stepped closer. And now that you have, she looked up at him. I'm trying to figure out if you're real. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek. The contact sent a shiver through her. I'll prove it, he said softly. Let me take you to dinner, just you and me, no investors, no launches, no crowd. Jaymie stared at him. You don't even know me, his voice dropped. Not yet. And for reasons she couldn't quite explain, Jaymie found herself nodding. Okay, she whispered. Dinner, he smiled. Not the polite kind, the real kind, and right then, under the rooftop lights and the city sky, something shifted. Something she couldn't name, but it felt a lot like the beginning of something she hadn't seen coming. Not at a hotel launch, not tonight, not with a billionaire, but it was happening anyway. Jaymie stood in front of her closet, holding up the only dress she owned that wasn't meant for job interviews or funerals. It was a deep blue wrap dress with a faint shimmer that only caught the light when she moved. She hadn't worn it in over a year. Tessa had bought it for her birthday and insisted it was quietly devastating. She wasn't sure what that meant, but it was the only thing that didn't make her look like she was trying too hard. She checked the time again. 7:30. He'd said 8. A driver would be picking her up, no address, no restaurant name, just an understated, I'll handle everything. Jaymie hated not knowing details. She liked control, plans, lists, but she'd said yes. And now she was standing in her bedroom, heart hammering like she was about to meet royalty. Or worse, someone who could see through her. A black luxury sedan pulled up outside her building. She grabbed her coat. The car was silent, the city passing by in a blur of streetlights and storefronts. She half expected to be taken somewhere over the top a rooftop with a private chef, or some Michelin-starred fortress with gold-covered menus. Instead, the car pulled into a narrow cobblestone alley behind Tribeca. A single iron lantern flickered above a wooden door with no sign. The driver opened her door and gestured toward it. The door swung open before she could knock. Xander stood there, no suit this time, just a black cashmere sweater and dark jeans. Still polished, but more human. You found it, he said. I was tempted to send a search party, she replied, stepping inside. The interior was warm, rustic, and utterly unlike the slick world she'd seen him in before. Exposed brick walls, shelves lined with old books and vinyl records, a long wooden table already set for two. You live here? She asked, surprised. No, I own it, but I come here when I want quiet. He led her to the table, pulling out her chair. A bottle of red wine was already breathing beside 2 glasses. I thought you'd prefer this, he said. Someplace that doesn't smell like money. Jaymie raised an eyebrow. You always try this hard, he poured the wine. Only when I don't want to be forgettable. The food came out moments later, grilled sea bass with roasted fennel, truffle risotto, and warm sourdough with whipped butter. No menu. Just brought out like it had been planned for days. Jaymie took a bite and closed her eyes. Okay, that's unfair. You like it, he asked. I might marry this risotto, she said. No offense, he laughed, and it caught her off guard. It wasn't a polite sound or a practiced one. It was real, low, and a little rough. You're not what I expected either, he said. Jaymie leaned back. What did you expect? Someone who wanted something from me, he said without hesitation. Most people do, but you don't flinch around me. You're not impressed by the noise. Maybe I just haven't seen the full circus yet. He studied her for a beat. You grew up here, Queens, she replied. Single mom, 2 jobs. I learned early that nothing's free, not even kindness. That's why you look at people like you're waiting for the catch, she paused. Am I that transparent? No, he said. Just familiar. She tilted her head. What's your story then? I don't buy the whole mystery billionaire vibe. Nobody gets to where you are without bleeding a little. He considered the question for a long moment. Then, My dad ran a garage, fixed cars, drank too much, didn't believe in banks. My mom was gone before I could spell her name. I taught myself to code in the back room of that garage using a laptop someone pawned and never came back for. Jaymie blinked. You're serious? I made my first million before I turned 20, he continued. But by then, I didn't care about the money, I just wanted out. She nodded slowly. So you built an empire and now hide behind hotel launches. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something like that. The wine was halfway gone and the air between them had shifted, not tense but charged, like the silence had meaning. Can I ask you something? She said. He nodded. Why me? Xander's gaze didn't waver. Because you looked at me like you had nothing to lose, like you weren't trying to impress me. That's rare. Jaymie broke eye contact first. Maybe I'm just bad at pretending. I hope so, he said. Pretending is exhausting. The server cleared their plates and disappeared again, leaving nothing but the soft hum of a vintage record player spinning something jazzy and slow in the corner. Xander stood and extended a hand. Dance with me. She stared at him. There's no one else here. Exactly. Jaymie hesitated, then placed her hand in his fingers closed around hers warm, steady. He pulled her gently toward him, one arm sliding around her waist. They moved slowly, their bodies close but not desperate. It wasn't about seduction. It felt more like discovery. After a moment, Jaymie whispered, "This is insane." "Maybe," Xander said, "but it's real." She looked up at him. "Are you always this intense?" He smiled. "Only when I don't want to miss something important." The song faded, but neither of them moved. Jaymie didn't know what this was yet, but she knew one thing: every second she spent with him chipped away at the wall she'd spent years building, and that terrified her more than anything. Jaymie hadn't realized how quiet her apartment was until she got home late that night. The city noise filtered through her window, the usual mix of distant sirens and the occasional horn, but inside, it was just her, the faint scent of the lavender candle she always forgot to blow out, and the memory of Xander's hand on her back as he'd walked her to the car. She leaned against her kitchen counter, heels dangling from one hand, and stared at the glowing numbers on the stove clock. Past midnight. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, but she didn't move. She wasn't sure she wanted anything to cut into the fragile aftermath of whatever that evening had been. The next morning, she woke to an email from Leela titled, "You're famous now." Attached was a link to a photo in a society blog. Jaymie, in her blue dress, standing next to Xander at the hotel launch. The caption read, "Xander Thorne seen with mystery guest." She groaned, dragging a hand across her face. That didn't take long. She tossed the phone onto the bed and headed into the bathroom. She had a shift to cover at the gallery, her real life waiting, ordinary and blessedly anonymous. The gallery on the Upper West Side was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that made every footstep echo across the polished floorboards. Jaymie flipped the open sign and settled behind the front desk, organizing brochures, trying not to think about gray eyes or jazz music or the way his voice had dipped when he'd said her name. At noon, a courier appeared at the front door holding a slim black box. "Delivery for Jaymie Carter," he said, already turning to leave. She blinked. "Wait, who?" But he was gone. Inside the box was a single silver key on a leather chain. No note, no explanation. Beneath it, a small card with a name embossed in black ink, Thorne Industries. She stared at it, heart racing. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she called the number on the card. A woman answered on the second ring. "Thorne Industries, how may I direct your call?" Jaymie hesitated. I just received something. A key, actually." "One moment, Miss Carter," the woman said, like she'd been expecting the call. There was a click, then silence, then, "Did you get it?" Xander's voice came through calm, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "I did," she said. "You sent me a key to what exactly?" "A secret panic room, an underground lair. It's to a space I'd like to show you," he said. "Tonight, can you meet me?" She exhaled slowly. "You're not going to tell me where it leads?" "No," he said. "But I promise it's worth it." She could hear the faint sound of city traffic behind him, but his voice was steady. "Certain, fine," she said, against her better judgment. "Where?" He gave her an address in Soho and told her to come alone. The building was unmarked, tucked between a designer showroom and a boutique wine bar. Jaymie stood in front of the heavy steel door, heart thudding. She slipped the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. Inside was a wide industrial loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and an open mezzanine above. But what struck her first wasn't the size, it was the walls. They were covered in art. Dozens of pieces, some abstract, some hauntingly detailed, all unique, and every single one of them was unsigned. Then she saw him standing near the far wall, sleeves rolled to his elbows, no jacket, just watching her. "You own a gallery?" she asked, walking toward him slowly. "No," he said, "not this one." "Then what is this?" "I collect," he said, "but I never show anyone." "Until now," she turned in place, trying to take it all in. "These are incredible. Who painted them?" His gaze didn't leave hers. "I did." She froze. "You painted these?" He nodded. "I started years ago." It was the only thing that made sense when everything else didn't. Jaymie walked to a large canvas in the center. It was dark, stormy, but there was a streak of gold beneath the chaos, a quiet defiance. "I don't understand," she said softly. "Why show me this?" "Because I wanted you to see something real," he said. "Everyone sees the boardrooms, the headlines, the price tags, but this is what matters. And for some reason, I wanted you to see it first." Jaymie turned, overwhelmed. "Why me?" His voice was low. "Because you look at things like they mean something, and because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the night we met." She swallowed hard. "That's not fair." "I'm not trying to be," he said. "I don't want a game, Jaymie. I want honesty. I want to know who you are when you're not performing for the world, and I'll give you the same." She stepped closer. "You don't even know what I want." "Then tell me," he said. Right now, Jaymie looked at him, really looked, the rawness in his expression, the lack of calculation. No corporate armor, no practiced charm, just a man trying to be seen. "I want something that doesn't fall apart when it gets hard," she said. "I want someone who doesn't disappear when things stop being shiny." He nodded once. "I don't disappear." She stared at him, unsure if it was bravery or madness that made her reach up and touch his face. He didn't move, just closed his eyes like her hand was something he'd been waiting for. Then his phone buzzed. Once. Then again. He stepped back with a reluctant breath and checked the screen. His jaw tightened. "I have to deal with something," he said, "but I want to see you tomorrow." Jaymie folded her arms. "Is this where you vanish for a week and pretend this didn't happen?" "No," he said, already moving toward the door. "This is where I handle something that might ruin everything if I don't." She followed him halfway. "What kind of something?" He turned at the threshold. "The kind that started the moment I decided to trust someone." And then he was gone. Jaymie stood alone in the middle of the loft, surrounded by his secrets, wondering what kind of past could make a man that powerful look so scared. Jaymie paced the hardwood floor of her apartment, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. It had been 3 full days since Xander had vanished from the gallery loft with that unreadable look in his eyes and a cryptic explanation that offered more questions than answers. No calls, no messages. Just silence. She wasn't the kind of girl who waited by her phone. She had a job, a life, responsibilities. But somehow her thoughts kept circling back to that night, to the way he had looked at her like she was the first person who had ever really seen him, and then he'd walked away. She tried to bury herself in work, helping the gallery prepare for their winter exhibit, but every spare second dragged her mind back to him. The quiet intensity in his voice, the weight behind every word, the walls he let her see behind for a moment. And then, Thursday morning, a courier arrived at the gallery once again. This time it wasn't a key. It was a single sheet of thick ivory paper. Her name was printed at the top in elegant script, followed by an address in Tribeca and a time, 7 o'clock, no message. No signature. She stared at it for a long time before folding it into her coat pocket. At 6:55, she stood in front of a discreet glass door bearing no signage. A doorman in a charcoal suit stepped aside without asking her name and pressed a button. The doors slid open silently, revealing a private elevator. When it opened again, she stepped into a penthouse that didn't look like it belonged in New York or even this world. The space was vast and open, all smooth curves and soft lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline in gold and indigo as the sun dipped below the edge of the city. Xander stood alone beside a grand piano, wearing a black shirt with the sleeves rolled just once, like he'd been halfway through a thought when she arrived. He looked at her as if he'd been holding his breath. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. Jaymie stepped forward. "I wasn't sure either." "I owe you an explanation," he said, his voice low but clear. She folded her arms, holding his gaze. "Then give me one." He moved toward the windows, motioning for her to join him. 3 years ago, I was engaged. That wasn't what she expected. She was brilliant," he continued. "Beautiful. We built a company together. She helped me shape the public face of my empire, but she didn't love me. She loved the world we created." Jaymie said nothing, letting him speak. "When things got difficult, when I stopped letting the media control the narrative, she left, not quietly. She sold off her shares to a rival, tried to dismantle everything we'd built." Jamie's stomach tightened. "You think I'm like her?" "No," he said quickly. "That's why I disappeared." She frowned. "That makes no sense, Xander." He looked at her then, the expression raw. "Because I realized I was doing it again. Giving pieces of myself to someone without knowing if they'd stay when the shine wore off. I didn't ask for anything from you." "I know," he said. "That's what terrified me." Jaymie stepped closer. "You think vulnerability is a transaction, but it's not. You don't give it away hoping someone will pay you back with loyalty. You give it because you trust them to hold it." He exhaled. "I don't know how to do that." "You just did," she said quietly. There was a long silence between them, heavy and delicate. Then he reached into his pocket and held out something small. It was a pendant, simple, silver, and familiar. "I found this on the floor of the gallery loft," he said. "I thought it might be yours." Jaymie took it, her fingers brushing his. It was her mother's. She hadn't even realized it had fallen. "I wore this the day she passed," she said, voice catching. "I guess I've been holding on to it like it still keeps her close." Xander didn't speak, but his eyes softened with something she hadn't seen before: reverence. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said. She nodded. "She was the strongest woman I've ever known. She didn't have much, but she gave everything. I think that's why I don't chase things that glitter. I know what real love costs." His hand rose to touch her face, hesitating before making contact. "Would it be foolish to tell you I'm falling in love with you?" Her breath caught. "A little. And if I said I'd do anything to make you believe it, then I'd say show me." He stepped back without a word and crossed the room to a sleek black panel. With a tap, the curtains drew back from the far wall, revealing a terrace lit by 100 candles and a long table set for two. A soft string quartet began to play from somewhere just out of view. Jaymie blinked. "You did this tonight?" "No," he said. "I did this the morning after I met you. I just didn't know when I'd have the courage to ask you back." She stared at him, emotion rising in her throat. "Xander." He walked toward her slowly. "I have more money than I'll ever need. I've been to places most people only see in dreams, but none of it has ever felt like home. Until you." She felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I want to build something that doesn't need a press release or a PR team," he said. "I want to build something real, with you." Jaymie stepped into his arms, not because it was a perfect gesture, but because it was real. Because every single thing he'd said had come not from a place of power, but from vulnerability. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. He kissed her, then, not careful, not practiced, but full of wonder. Like he'd been holding that moment in reserve for a lifetime. Later, as they danced beneath the open sky, the city stretching endlessly behind them, Jaymie leaned her head against his chest and smiled. "Is this what it feels like when the shine doesn't wear off?" He kissed her temple. "No. This is what it feels like when it finally means something." And in that moment, with candlelight flickering around them and music floating through the night air, she knew she hadn't just met the man behind the glittering world. She'd found the one who would never let her fall through it alone. The rain came down in waves as Jaymie stepped out of the town car and darted beneath the awning of Thorn Industries headquarters. She wasn't dressed for a storm cream blouse, heels too high for puddles, but she hadn't cared. Not when Xander had called that morning and said, "There's something I want you to see, something I've never shared with anyone." The lobby was a polished expanse of glass and steel, but what struck her wasn't its size, it was the quiet efficiency of it. Everyone she passed greeted her by name as though she belonged here. She wasn't sure how he'd managed that, but it didn't surprise her anymore. Nothing about Xander did. She took the elevator to the top floor. The doors opened into a space she hadn't seen before. Not his office. Not the public-facing suite. This was something else. Warm, minimal, but intimate. There was a long table with architectural models, blueprints pinned to the walls, and a narrow hallway that led to a private wing. Xander stood near the window, sleeves rolled, hair damp from the run in the rain. A tablet lay forgotten on the table beside him. "I thought you said you'd be working," she said as she walked in. "I was," he replied. "But then I realized I didn't want to be alone when I opened this." He handed her a padded envelope. She opened it carefully, revealing a folded letter and a photograph. Her breath caught. She recognized the woman instantly, older, softer, but unmistakable. Her own eyes, her mother's smile. "She wrote me once," Xander said. "After I made my first investment, I never opened it. I didn't want to know what she thought after all those years, but I found it again yesterday." Jaymie touched the photo. "Why now?" "Because you reminded me what forgiveness looks like. And because I realized I wanted to understand where I came from before I build something with someone." She looked up, heart aching for him. "What did the letter say?" He hesitated, then read, "I hope you've made peace with the boy you were. He deserved more than what we gave him. I hope someday you feel loved for who you are, not what you've built." Jaymie folded the letter and set it gently down. "She saw more than you thought." Xander nodded. "I think that's why I couldn't face it until now." Jaymie stepped toward him, touching his chest lightly. "You don't have to carry it alone." He let out a slow breath, resting his forehead against hers. "I don't want to." They stood there for a long moment, the city humming outside, rain tapping quietly against the glass. Then he reached for something in his back pocket. "I've been trying to find the right moment, but I realized there isn't one. There's just now." He opened a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a single emerald set in a thin gold band, nothing flashy but striking in its restraint. Like everything he did, it had intention, clarity. Jaymie's heart stopped. "I could take you to Paris, to Milan. I could buy you a rooftop sunset or a diamond the size of your hand," he said, voice steady. "But none of that matters if I don't have this, us. The quiet, the truth, the real." She blinked fast, trying to keep her voice level. "You're doing it backwards, I know," he said. "But I've built things from scratch before. I can build a life with you if you'll let me." She didn't answer with words. She simply nodded, then threw her arms around him as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They kissed, not with urgency, but with certainty. Like two people who had stopped running from their pasts and started running toward each other. 6 months later, the gallery was packed. Jaymie stood near the center, surrounded by canvases she'd personally curated. It was her first show as creative director of the Thorne Foundation for the Arts, a new initiative Xander had launched quietly, funding independent artists and community studios across the city. He hadn't done it for show. He'd done it because she'd told him once that art gave people a language when words failed. He understood that now. As she greeted donors and press, she felt a hand slide around her waist. "You're still the most beautiful thing in the room," he whispered. She smiled. "You're biased. I'm invested." She turned to face him. "Are you ready?" He nodded. "Let's do it." They stepped onto the small platform at the center of the gallery. Jaymie tapped the mic. "Thank you all for being here. This space is more than a gallery, it's a promise. That every voice deserves to be seen, that creativity is survival, and that the best things in life are the ones you build from the ground up." There was a ripple of applause, but her eyes were only on Xander. After the guests left and the lights dimmed, they stood in the echo of the evening, arms around each other. "Do you ever think about how none of this was supposed to happen?" she asked. "Every day," he said. "And then I thank whatever twist of fate made it happen anyway." She rested her head on his shoulder. "I never wanted a fairy tale, just something real." "You got both," he whispered, and she had. They built a life not on borrowed time or grand illusions, but on moments that mattered. On late-night project sketches, dinners where they argued over music, mornings wrapped in each other's arms while the world waited outside. Jaymie never again wondered if he'd disappear. Xander never again questioned whether he was enough. Together, they created something neither of them had dared to imagine, a life not built on wealth or power, but on the quiet, enduring foundation of love that had been waiting for both of them all along.